All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Me here talking about real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Remembering the late great Dan Seals. Anybody who knows Dan Seals knows that he was England Dan and the duo England Dan and John Ford Coley back in the 1970s. Those guys had a string of songs that were very popular on both AM radio and then later your laid back FM stations as well. Um, everybody knows these lyrics, right? I ain't talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life. There's a warm wind blowing and the stars are out, and I'd really love to see you tonight. Totally the non committal late 1970s. Look, just want to hang out. I'd really love to see you tonight. Anyway, Dan Seals and his buddy John Ford Coley. By the way, Dan Seals was known as England Dan. And for kind of a radio geek like me, that caused problems because I was always thinking later on that he was the dude from Seals and Crofts because his name was Dan Seals. But then I found out that it was his brother Jim who is in Seals and Crofts, and that created more tension, more problems for me trying to remember things. All I know is that Dan Seals used to do a British accent or something. He was obsessed with the Beatles in the early days. He and his cohort from high school, John Ford Coley, JFC, not to be confused with KFC, which has really good chicken, whereas JFC, at his house anyway, apparently he serves really good pie. That's all I know about John Ford Coley. But in any event, it was kind of like a poor man's version of Hall & Oates. You've got this great lead vocalist. The other guy is good too, but you've got this great lead singer. The other guy sings every so often, but you still got this great lead singer. And you've got a slew of laid back, sort of California rock infused songs from the mid to late 70s. And it was a pretty good formula. They had a number of big songs, including covering Todd Rundgren's Love is the Answer, which became a monster song for them. And it's a pretty emotional song, too. Their redo is better than the original Todd version. And I typically don't say that about do-overs or cover versions, but they just killed it. And there's no question that the arrangement really helped push the song forward. What happened to Dan Seals, though, in the 1980s is very interesting because England Dan and John Ford Coley, they went their separate ways. And England Dan ended up hanging out, doing a couple of albums with Atlantic. I'm sure the contract said, hey, you got to do more records for us. And they did bring in some heavy hitters, people like David Foster and Steve Lukather and many other great studio musicians to try to keep that England Dan magic going. But he had two albums, and unfortunately, they didn't do all that well for Atlantic Records. John Ford Coley went on to be in a very weird group called Leslie Kelly and John Ford Coley. Sounds almost like a talk show, right? It's Leslie Kelly and John Ford Coley, and we put John Ford Coley last like he's an afterthought. I mean, they should have just went with the JFC thing, all right? But needless to say, they were trying to be new wave and pop, and they're trying to adapt, and it didn't work out. I don't know if it was because John Ford Coley was getting like third billing. I'm not sure, but most likely it was a lack of promotions due to the fact that they had to record an album because it was in the contract. Typically, when that happens with an artist, the outcome isn't always very good. So after two albums with Atlantic, and I don't know what happened to John Ford Coley after that. I'm sure he was still in the music business, but I don't remember anything else significant happening. I do remember Dan Seals continued on. Eventually, Capitol Records decided to take a chance. And I imagine them going into a meeting, that large building, maybe close to the top, and Dan Seals is sitting there, and some A&R guy is staring him down saying, "I've got an idea. Ditch the England, Dan, because nobody really knows what that means, and just go with your name. All right, because now your brother, he's out of the music business too. Seals and Crofts, they were also over in 1980. Isn't that interesting? I might have to do a video about that someday, how 1980 was very similar to, say, like 1991 in some regards, except I could listen to the music of the 1980s. I couldn't listen to the music of the 1990s. But there were a few people who weren't adapting. You know, not everybody could be Chicago or Heart or a number of bands that were able to transition from the 70s to the 80s. But those executives at Capitol probably said, hey, look, grab a cowboy hat, cut your hair, and grow a beard. And sure enough, Dan Seals did that. And by 1983, after 3 singles failed to really chart, the 4th time was a charm, and he ended up with a top 10 song. This was a record label that was devoted and dedicated to making Dan Seals a country star. Capitol Records, pretty reliable record label. I mean, if you get on their good side, they're going to help you. And apparently, they didn't want Dan Seals to fail. Dan Seals had a voice that was very much like Vince Gill's voice. And he was doing it before Vince Gill really got on the scene. When you look at his career, it's kind of like that high, lonesome sound where you can be in a low register and then you can go up to that falsetto and sound a little, almost like there's a little yodeling going on there. But it's basically just a really good falsetto. And Dan Seals could do that. And that was perfect for country music. You grab a pedal steel or a mandolin, and you've got 16 consecutive top 10 hits, including, I think, a whole handful of #1 songs, one with Marie Osmond, and that song in particular was a big song and helped along by the late, great Paul Davis, who also made that transition over to country, not necessarily as a country artist, but writing for Nashville. And Paul Davis, and then you've got Dan Seals, and that's just a great combination. And of course, the song was called Meet Me in Montana. And at that point, Dan Seals was on top of the world in the country music scene. The only artist probably bigger than Dan Seals during that time frame was maybe Alabama. I don't know who else was really on the scene and sort of new and fresh and, you know, doing things that other artists at that moment weren't able to do. Dan Seals, of course, would run into another brick wall in 1990. That is unfortunate. The scene changed again, and the mild-mannered, soft-spoken cowboy would be replaced by the likes of Billy Ray Cyrus and Garth Brooks, and a whole plethora of country upstarts that would take a little bit of that rock and roll sound and infuse it into traditional country. A lot of people called it neo-country. You had Alan Jackson and Clint Black. So Dan Seals, the guy who did really well in the 1980s with his cowboy hat and his acoustic guitar, was being replaced. And it's kind of a shame, because here's a guy who probably didn't get the recognition he deserved as a pop and rock guy in the 70s, and then dominating country radio during the 1980s. I'm sure, you know, he won some CMA awards and he did fairly well for himself. But as far as overall lifetime recognition, I think both the Rock Hall of Fame, if you want to call it that, and the Country Music Hall of Fame, they certainly overlooked a super talent. So again, this video pays tribute to Dan Seals, the late, great Dan Seals. Unfortunately, Dan Seals passed away in 2009 from what I remember to be a very aggressive form of lymphoma. He was treated for a while, but again, passed away at the age of 61. So for those of you who are fans of Dan Seals, for his friends and his family, this video goes out to you guys. Dan Seals certainly deserves recognition, a great singer, a great writer, a great guitarist, and definitely missed, but his music from the 1980s and prior to that certainly lives on. And he did two fantastic albums called In a Quiet Room Volume 1 and In a Quiet Room Volume 2. That's Dan Seals at his absolute best. You should check those out. In any event, my name is Dave. Thanks for watching this channel. Don't forget to subscribe to it, and I will see you very soon.